Hello, everybody. Welcome to the Table for Three podcast. My name is Dito, and here I am brought with my friends Six Unleashed and Certified Tea Sipper. Uh, hey, how you doing?
Hello.
This is the first in many episodes of series that we're doing called the Table for Three. You get it, okay? You came here, you know who we are, and we're gonna do it. This is a mostly Sonic centered podcast, as you know that's basically what we do. But who knows? Maybe we'll try something new, something different every once in a while. For the most part, it's just gonna be us three chilling, hanging out, talking about the worst game franchise on the planet. Eventually, we'll bring in some guests. We'll just see how things go. So,
Yeah, and should we get straight into the topic?
yeah, I believe that's the whole point we're here. So,
Well, right off the bat, did Sonic have a rough transition into 3D?
I hate this conversation already.
So do I.
Uh-uh.
But to be fair, who suggested it?
Not me. I suggested the good ones.
I did not suggest that one. No, that was that. No, that no. Yeah, this was there before. Well, I mean, shout out to my boy Boney's Network because he suggested it.
Dang, Boney.
But I mean,
Imagine.
when that question's asked, when was the transition to 3D? Because it's automatically seen as adventure, but the transition began with either 3D Blast or Extreme. Because Extreme was
Right.
cancelled, but the transition was beginning, and 3D Blast,
Mhm.
it might not be 3D, but it is called 3D Blast.
It's more like a perspective, top-down 3D graphics kind of
Isometric.
thing.
Yeah,
Yeah,
it
yeah,
tricks
yeah.
you into believing it's 3D. On the Saturn, it did have a half pipe that was very close to 3D.
Right.
However,
Um,
most people played the
if I
Genesis.
Yeah, if I were to think, yeah, no, Sonic R, if we're talking about like the first 3D games, I would say maybe. Adventure was really when it found its footing, in my opinion. But I do enjoy contemplating the fact of when Sonic had a transition into 3D because, people see it as Adventure, of course, because it's the first mainline game. So, that's the game people obviously gravitate towards. But if we're thinking about it logically, sure, Extreme in 3D. If we were to put it in Adventure, no, I wouldn't say it a rough transition in 3D. But if we're talking about Extreme, 3D Blast, R, those games, that's a definite yes for me, just because of how poorly the games were received by many, many people. But it's more subjective of a topic than anything.
From my
But
point
I,
of
I, I
view,
do, yeah, yeah, yeah. It all really just depends
I, f-
on the point of view.
I do see that Adventure had a great sort of transition into 3D compared to how it could have been. Because if you look at Extreme, what you would consider the original transitions into 3D, Extreme went horribly for the game and for the devs. The project went horribly.
Right.
We know the story of Extreme, and that's fairly sad to be fair. And that is rough. That is a rough transition to 3D because it was rough for the people actually making the project, and it was rough for the people that wanted to see the game come out and it never came out.
Right. Then again, you could always trace back 3D and Sonic games all the way back to Sonic 2.
You could, especially Sonic 3, where they wanted to make a 3D game with Sonic 3. However, that got relegated to only blue spheres because the Genesis could just not handle 3D.
Right.
However, it
Yeah,
could
I find
handle
it a.
simulation with the Genesis pretty well.
Mm-hmm. I find that to be very interesting. Yeah, again with the adventure thing, people just immediately go to that. But you can even, I'm pretty sure you can even go back to that racing game Sonic appeared in before Sonic 1, because I'm pretty sure that was like somewhat 3D. So even then, you could be like, oh yeah, Sonic had a real rough transition into 3D with that one car game, right?
You could, although I would suggest the whole idea of Sonic himself as a franchise transitioning to 3D is more the meaning behind that. So you're transitioning
Yes.
Sonic the character, the gameplay, into 3D rather than just adding Sonic into a franchise that's already 3D. Like if I add Sonic to Forza, he's not Sonic all of a sudden isn't a racing game. It's just Sonic in Forza.
Right. Yeah, that makes sense.
I mean, yeah, 90s. What's your stance on this?
It's more like Mario Kart, really.
I do
No.
agree because at Adventure, they were testing out a few things. I've heard that the Dreamcast had Sonic Adventure as both a launch title and a testing basis for different gameplay. Big's whole gameplay revolves around the fact that Sega were making a device for a fishing game and they wanted to see how well said fishing game would work, and they used Big as a platform to do that. And to expand on this whole, you know, Sega just not being ready, you look at Sonic Adventure 2 after Sonic Adventure 1, and as far as actual programming of the game goes, Sonic Adventure 2, on a technical level, can run at a higher frame rate and a higher resolution, showing that the devs know how to program a 3D game better by Sonic Adventure 2. And it shows that they weren't ready at Sonic Adventure 1 and definitely weren't ready back in Extreme.
Yeah. I definitely feel like. Uh, I definitely feel like Adventure 2 was where it really found its footing in 3D. Does really. When I go back and play it now, Adventure really just feels like a beta version to Adventure 2 because Adventure 2, while not my favorite game in the Sonic series, it's still a fantastic game and it has a lot of the things ironed out that drug Adventure 1 down in a lot of people's opinions. So, it also added good characters and a good story. It's overall just like a better Adventure 1 in a sense. So, I feel like if they were swapped around almost, people would have a much better perception on how Sonic landed into quote unquote 3D.
Yes, yeah, and especially when you look at character animation, that's the biggest thing that people always bring up. Adventure 1 had janky character animation, and the dialogue sounded like it was pulled out of many different voice clips at a lot of points. Sonic Adventure 2 really refined when and where dialogue is used, and it also refined the animations. The animations for Sonic Adventure 2 are great for the Dreamcast, for a game
Much
like
better.
that.
Yeah.
90s, have you played Sonic Adventure 1 or 2?
Really.
I do understand what you mean. For example, they've taken Gamma, which I actually had a fair amount of fun with. I didn't expect I would, but I found it to be engaging, and they've watered it down to Eggman and Tails. I think Eggman works mostly fine. Then you've got Tails, and I don't think his levels work at all. I did not enjoy them. I enjoyed Eggman's a slight bit, especially because Eggman was a lot more involved in the story within his levels. Tails, not so much. In fact, it was funny because I kind of liked Tails driving missions. They're not great at all. They are really bad, but you know, compared to Tails' normal gameplay, I preferred that. And, as a side note, on a technical level, Sonic Adventure 2 is more refined. But as far as Sonic's gameplay goes, Adventure 1 has the better Sonic gameplay, in my opinion. But, like, with Adventure 2, you have some more quality of life improvements, such as things like the bounce bracelet. But
See, that
yeah,
also could be put into like because Sonic may or may not have had a rough transition into 3D, but like how would you say that he fared up like later on whenever things would get more refined and totaled? See, from like the growth from Adventure 1 to say like Shadow the Hedgehog, how much would you say in a 5 year time span would that be an improvement over the original? Say like what's like the most recent momentum based Sonic game mainline that you know of that can be
I mean,
yeah, besides Mania,
yeah,
that that can be compared to Adventure 1 in terms of gameplay.
Sonic 06, that's the biggest I can think of.
Yeah.
Actually, and we're going to
No.
have this subject in the future, and that's going to be a great one. Heroes, in my playthrough, my most recent that I'm still doing, is quite the momentum is there. I do actually kind of enjoy Heroes gameplay, and there's just some mechanics that I don't know how to formulate into a description yet, but they do. I do enjoy them, and I do think there is a good sense of momentum. However, sometimes Heroes decides to all of a sudden ramp up the acceleration. And if you're going to combine momentum and acceleration, and all of a sudden your momentum that you naturally build up momentum, and all of a sudden that goes from 0 to 100, that's an issue. But as far as
Yeah.
06 goes, there's no sense of momentum, and the gameplay has been heavily downgraded in 06. It basically takes Adventure 2 and 1 but makes it a lot worse, and obviously, visually unappealing, in my opinion, mainly because it wasn't complete. These areas in 06, when they're complete, do look a lot more appealing. Just look at P06. And same with 06 gameplay when it's complete, just look at P06. And P06 takes hints from Adventure 1, and it's so much more fun when it does that, rather than being more like Heroes slash '06 in its gameplay. And on a technical level, obviously, '06 is far worse than even SADX, which means it's definitely worse than Sonic Adventure. So, in my opinion, '06 is that real, like, '06 shows me it didn't have a rough transition into 3D at Adventure. It had a rough transition towards, like, it had a rough transition from Adventure to Boost, because, like, with Adventure, it all starts to fall down, and that's what led into the Boost gameplay. So I
Right.
think the biggest rough transition was back with '06, more than the transition into 3D. But '90s, what's your take on this?
Comparing I guess your favorite momentum game to Adventure 1 and how much it's improved or downgraded, I guess that question could be evolved into.
100% acceleration slash through the roof design. I mean, when you think about it, at least Sonic 06 manages to be more of a platformer with some acceleration, because that's what he was originated from. Well, that's what he originated from. He's a 2D platformer with the momentum physics that allows him to become fast. But what are you going to do when he's too fast? And You throw the platforming in there.
I agree. I mean, I would say my favorite 3D momentum game, you know, it will probably be Project '06, but I'm not going to count that because that's mainline. Shadow 2005, definitely not. And it's funny because I play Heroes on PC, but with Adventure 1 style physics, and I really enjoy that because it's half Heroes, half Adventure 1, and it's much more stable in its 0 to 100 acceleration. And I actually really enjoy Heroes gameplay like that. However, that's not the original Heroes either, and so I can't compare it to that. I mean, it's a weird one because adventure gameplay isn't my favorite, but I like the levels in SA2 with the gameplay of SA1 because I don't particularly like I like SA2's gameplay, but when you take SA2's gimmicks like the bounce bracelet and put them in SA1 with SA1's gameplay, I just find SA1's to be the smoothest. And so I'd say I enjoy that the most.
Right. That makes sense.
I mean, Dylan, you've probably got a good amount to say here considering you've got Heroes to compare to Adventure.
I mean, I guess I don't really know what there is to say about it that already hasn't been said, considering how Sonic Heroes is my favorite Sonic game ever, but I'm not afraid to criticize it. But people who have played Heroes have already said everything. The controls are unrefined. The controls are unrefined. Yeah, I agree. I feel like the physics should have been touched up a little bit. The character animation is a little poopy on that department. I still think the story is really good. I think the character dialogue is really good. I still think the soundtrack is amazing. So, I mean, I guess I don't really it's really interesting to think about how people would react if Sonic Heroes was the big transition into 3D, because I think Heroes' levels are a lot better than the ones in Adventure 1 and 2. They have a lot, they're very linear, but they're also pretty open-ended. It feels like a classic stage, like Sonic 2 era, just brought into 3D. There's a lot of pathways you can take, there's a lot of ways you can go, and all it is just on a Z axis, which is something I really appreciate. I also really like the idea of the team dynamic. The team dynamic is very good, very useful. It also helps with platforming, more precise platforming, because sometimes those controls can be bad. So using tails or knuckles for combat and flying and stuff, that helps tremendously with the control issues, I guess. Um, I don't know. It's really hard to compare Heroes to Adventure 1 on a gameplay standpoint because being very similar, they're very different at the exact same time. I mean, of course, you have those momentum based levels, but I'd say Adventure's levels are much more linear than, not like straight path levels of linear, but still very linear nonetheless in terms of where you need to go to get to point A to point B. Of course, there's like a splitting pathway, but that doesn't take much time to come back to the main pathway. There's a little bit of secrets if you go off the diverged path, but again, that's not really an extra way to get to the goal if you do well or do bad. So, I don't know. It's and there's also not any upgrades in Heroes, so that also I wouldn't say that sucks, but I feel like that's easily replaced with the leveling up system, which is also nice. I don't know. I feel like Heroes, in terms of what it brought, it feels like everything brought to the table, something else was taken out as like a sacrifice almost, in terms of
I
what made
agree.
them.
Yeah, I agree with that. Because what I've noticed with Heroes is you take the good control out, but you replace it with better levels. At least that's my opinion. And for me, like with Sonic Adventure 2, you've got good controls that in some spots are brought down by the levels. But you've got Heroes that, has issues with its controls, and that brings down the levels. But then when you fix the control issues as best as you can, the levels are so vastly improved, and it really does shine how good the level design is in Heroes, for example. And I mean, Heroes is definitely growing on me a lot. Um, and I like the team dynamic, the leveling up dynamic. Like the leveling up dynamic, I think is done correctly, just perfectly correctly, if that makes any sense. And I think that is a better, I think that is better than upgrades because you go into the level weak, and then about halfway through, you've maxed out all of your characters, and then you can go through that slightly harder second half faster as well because you haven't skipped past everything. You've explored other little routes, and I do think Heroes does do that level design better.
I guess that's like rewarding good gameplay over not. Like, instead of the different pathways, you can also level up your heroes, which by getting it, you're basically getting rewarded for doing good. Upgrading Knuckles' punches or the Thunder Shoot getting upgraded. That's definitely another like satisfying reward for good gameplay because it also adds to your score, helps get the A rank, which is also another really satisfying thing.
Getting the A rank in Heroes is basically it's more satisfying than the S rank in one of the newer Sonic games, to be honest. Even Unleashed, I see, although I could just be numb to that by now, but the A rank in Heroes is so much more impactful than the S rank in Sonic 06 or Sonic Unleashed. And that's the thing, it's so much more impactful than the S rank in Sonic 06, which is the equivalent of it. And it's like, because I think with Heroes, you've got the tri-dynamic gameplay, you you need to be good at swapping between characters efficiently, using the correct powers, and also being fast at the level. Like,
Mm-hmm.
it's so satisfying to just, as Sonic, do a light speed dash, skip this somewhat, sizable amount of area, and then get a score for it, and successfully just doing that. I mean, like, keeping my momentum up in Heroes, I enjoy doing that more than Sonic Adventure 1 or 2.
Mm-hmm. So I guess with this new Sonic game, there's a lot of, since nothing has been shown at this time of recording, nothing has been shown about the new game, and I guess that brings up a huge question since literally nothing has been shown besides the 30-second trailer. What will the gameplay style be like? I know we've seen leaks and such like that, but there's no concrete like evidence showing what it'll be like because you see Sonic running, that could be something to do with momentum, but then he also gets a boost like in the forces and Unleashed and such, so it's very confusing. Something I would definitely want to talk about is where could Sonic be heading if the new game fails or succeeds.
Well, in my opinion, if the new game fails, I don't think much is going to change about Sega. They'll continue playing it safe because that's probably how it failed to begin with. They were probably playing it too safe, and then it fails, and they'll probably just continue doing that again and again and again. I don't see Sonic to be failing either. You've got Origins Collection coming out, you've got the next movie bringing in a bunch of new fans. I wouldn't see that to be an issue. However, if the game succeeds, now the assumption of the game succeeding will probably be based on the fact that they've tried something new and they've succeeded at doing it. And that's great. That is great. If they succeed at something new, they'll be more inspired to either continue that thing, but hopefully they don't keep on making new things like they did from '06 up until Lost World. Just stick to that path. If this new thing succeeds, innovate on that design with the next new thing, but don't drag it out like you did the boost, and don't instantly change it like in Lost World.
Mm-hmm. 90s. 90s.
Um, gonna be honest, the way Sonic is right now, I feel like he'll just stay in the meta, or what they call the meta era. I mean, he's technically been in that era since what, Colors?
Yeah.
I guess it wasn't really considered an era at the time, considering that Sonic Colors was brand new. So I would honestly, the meta area I'd see towards like 2015 and now.
I would see it as beginning in Lost World because Lost World takes what Colors sort of did wrong and, amplifies that, at least in its story.
True, true.
And, like, I don't care if they lean into the jokes, but there's a correct way of doing it and a wrong way of doing it. And I thought Unleashed was a very good way of doing it. You have the joke be inserted to the background or the end of the cutscene or dialogue phase, and this cutscene is based on explaining the story, rather than having an entire cutscene that's just a joke. Because, like, when you've got Sonic talking to Professor Pickle, Tails explaining how to use the radar thing, and you just see Chip in the background just over exaggerating the wiping a cup or trying to make tea. That's entertaining because you are focusing on Sonic and Professor Pickle's dialogue, i.e., the story, but you do get some amusement out of what's happening in the background. That is how you do it. Rather
Yeah.
than making your story about bullying the villain, i.e., Sonic towards Infinite or Sonic towards Eggman back in Colors.
Right. Yeah, that joke also makes the exposition dump less. It makes it more tolerable because I know how bad exposition dumps can be, and so throwing in those well-timed jokes in there could also be a very good idea in a sense.
Yes, like, a lot of the cutscenes with Professor Pickle are, when you look at it realistically, just Professor Pickle explaining the story to Sonic, i.e., you. And so when you're able to listen to the story and understand the story, but also see these jokes happening or have a joke happen at the end, it does make you laugh. Like, I don't find any cringe within Unleashed jokes because the jokes are relegated to scenes that there's nothing more needed to be said as far as story goes. It doesn't intrude on the footing that the story could have. It doesn't intrude on the progression of the story either. Yeah, and I think that's even worse because Colors had exposition of the joke, not even exposition of the story where you can understand it, but exposition of the joke itself. If the person can't get the joke, they don't need to get the joke. That's the thing. When Unleashed did its fourth wall breaking or made jokes that maybe your teenager would understand more than your young child, if the child doesn't get the joke, they don't need to because it's not going to take anything away from the cutscene, but you do not force your jokes. I think with Sonic Lost World, the issue that game had is that it tried to force its story, it tried to force emotion. The problem is what I feel is unfortunate is the script Roger Craig Smith is given a lot of the time tries to force things rather than have them naturally move at a natural pace. And like Rogers, in a way, forced to say things that make no sense. And but
Well, that
on,
could also be a problem with direction and what he was given, because I know with the adventure games, a lot of them had Japanese directors or very little direction in the West. Period. So it was, like actors were not given context for the scenes that they were in. So that could also be it's not as much the line as it is the delivery, as like because Roger Craig Smith has been really good lately as Sonic, in my opinion, and I think that's just more because because the joke can be bad or ironic, but it's all about how the actor will portray the joke and how they will say, like, if you're in a serious tone, but you're not given context for the scene being serious, you're just like, oh, you're somewhat serious, and you don't actually see what's going on. It could be really confusing, and I think that's where Roger's not a bad actor by any means. He's a fantastic voice actor. But when
yeah,
you have bad direction and stuff like that on these lines, that's where the problem comes in.
I do agree. And you know what's funny? Recent Twitter takeover that was made in the West for a Western audience, and that had direction and stellar, stellar voice acting, even from Shadow, who, in some people's opinions, has not been that great over the last few years. Now, I think Shadow was fine over the last few years, but Twitter takeover was good. That was really good. And Roger did he did great. And that's what I think. I think Forces had a bit more direction than normal because Roger could be more natural. However, Roger doesn't seem like the sort of person to be able to act in an emotional way as far as Sonic goes, and that's been shown in Lost World. However, he can definitely act in any way, except you need the direction to be solid because going back to Dylan's point, direction in Sonic Adventure 1 was very flimsy. There was more or less none, and you could hear that. However, with Sonic Adventure 2, the Western audience were given a much more refined script. Certain things still didn't match up, but that was more due to translation not fitting in with Japanese dialogue that was in the game. And Sonic Adventure 2 flowed much better. And then you take Sonic Heroes, them cutscenes are great. I think that the CGI cutscenes have very good acting, very good voice direction. They are expressive. The animation is also expressive. The animation is in line with the dialogue being said, and I think that's good.
Right. Gonna
Animation aside, yeah, definitely, I agree.
gonna give props to Roger Craig Smith, especially in the Sonic Boom TV show.
Oh yeah. Oh yeah.
Like that right there, he's not constrained to just gaming. He's free to act in character as much as he wants.
That and the characters are a lot more expressive in the show, which definitely helps a lot with the more exaggerated acting that Roger can give at times. And it's also in house, which in the sense that it's in the West, and there's no like on purpose at least or on accident. There's no direct translation errors. Nothing getting lost in the translation, so it's direct directing, I guess, and it definitely really helps. I mean, I think everyone in Boom gave a fantastic performance, especially Eggman.
Just like with the Twitter takeover, and that's the thing. I mean, this is slightly a bit more uh back to the topic before that, but you go back to Unleashed, the first second in-engine cutscene where the camera's descending on the front of Apotos. You see Sonic and Chip walking to the ice cream stand, and then they introduce each other. And then, you then have Sonic say, "I'm Sonic, Sonic the Hedgehog," and then you see that really expressive animation where he points in the air and smiles, and then Chip walks away. He's really expressive, showing how much he wants that ice cream. And then you have Sonic in the background going Chip with all of this waving animation, animated quills, and then he screams Chip, and he shows that he's like shouting by putting his hands near his mouth to amplify the noise. That's the thing. Unleashed shows that Sonic can have great animation alongside great dialogue and have it
Yeah.
work really well, like really well.
Well,
However,
I also think that it has to do with time constraints as well because there's no excuse for Sonic Unleashed to look as good as it does, but have a game come out 10 years later and it looks 10 times worse. And I think that's just mainly due to the time. Because I'm pretty sure, like, what, Forces had, like, 1 year of development?
well, the
And
thing that rubs me the wrong way with a statement like that is that Forces and Unleashed had the same amount of time in the oven. In fact, Unleashed probably had less because if 3 to 4 years were spent on Hedgehog Engine 2, let me remind you that Unleashed also made Hedgehog Engine 1 at the like during its development. It's 2 year development versus the 4 year overall development for Forces, Hedgehog Engine 2 and Forces. And Forces had double the amount of time, and obviously from what I know about Hedgehog Engine 2, it is not designed for super cartoony visuals like Lost World. Their original intention was slightly more down to earth visuals, something more in line with Unleashed or Generations. And that makes
right.
sense considering Generations was the last game in that specific style. And so you can see that most models in the game look like plastic. And it's as if they are plastic. It's as if they can't move any part of their body but their arms and legs. And with Unleashed, the models looked more natural and they could move every single part. And so I don't understand how Forces got this wrong. And that's the thing. Your animation was there. The time must have been there because you see what they could do in 2 years with Unleashed. They could make that entire thing versus 4 years with Forces. I reckon they had enough time to animate. However, I think the thing that failed them was budget and lack of staff that worked on Unleashed. I don't think that the same animators for Unleashed actually worked on Forces. I mean, you've got Unleashed that has this giant development team, and that's almost cut in like a third. That's cut down to a third in Forces, and that is also due to budget. Because if they had a higher budget, they would hire more people. Yeah.
You know that Sonic Forces only had like one manager, right?
Yeah, Sonic Forces was a very small development team. I mean, Sonic Unleashed wasn't a huge development team by any means. However, Sonic Forces was cut down to a third, which is still a third of your team gone. No, 2/3 of your team gone.
In contrast, you also have Big Red Button who made Sonic Boom. However, they did bring back Chris Sen, the one who made Sonic Extreme, well, who tried to make Sonic Extreme. And even with those limitations, they did all they could and made a giant map. Or here, as in Forces, you can only go through one linear hallway with like maybe a little diversion, but that's it.
I mean, in my opinion, I don't have much more to say on Boom other than I personally don't enjoy that style of gameplay. However, I know there are people that would, and the game looks competent enough now to where people could enjoy that. And it's a much more, it looks more fleshed out than Forces in some areas. Obviously, there are some very, very bad areas of Boom and '06 to that extent because Forces is a very like it's like they had a very short range goal, but they did complete this goal. That's what Forces looks like. Whereas '06 looks like they had a grand scale goal, but they weren't able to complete it. Same with Boom. And that's the thing. Forces looks finished, but it looks like they just didn't try as hard.
In the lighting engine and what's Boom, it's just that from what I gathered, is that they apparently were just making this on PC, PS3, and Xbox 360. And what happened is that they got stuck putting this on the Wii U.
Yeah, they did. So it's like, imagine taking Noto G's fan game, trying to drag it all into Unity and make it work. You would probably have a really hard time doing that, and that's more or less what happened on the Wii, because Nintendo themselves had to add software and compatibility with the CryEngine for Wii U because it was way too late in development for them to switch from the CryEngine. So the CryEngine was not supported on Nintendo devices, but Nintendo had to add this functionality. And that shows you how much of a mess that was.
I mean, they were willing to go the extra mile, but when you think about it, this came out on PC. Like, this probably would have been a very good game.
I can't remember what it was called. I can't remember what it was called. The PC version of Rise of Lyric. But
Sonic Synergy.
Good. Yeah, Sonic Synergy looked amazing. That looks like it would genuinely be fun. A co-op game like that that's, it tricks you into thinking it's open world. Some of it is, but it's more of an exploration. That's such a good idea. However, Sega drags them down, and that's such a shame.
It was definitely Sega's meddling that screwed it all up.
If this game was just made the way it was going to be and then put on PC, it would have all worked out. Like, based on how much I've seen about that.
Gonna be honest, everything that was in the so I've seen the early builds of Sonic Synergy, well, Sonic Boom, whatever. Um, at the time, it wasn't very finalized, so they still had like this matted mesh material around them. But the one thing that stuck out to me was mostly the expressiveness of those characters. Even though they're not highly detailed, man, I will tell you, they look very nice.
I've seen that, and the final release of Sonic Boom, it has a lot of expression. However, no, it does not have expression in the in-engine cutscenes, but in the pre-rendered cutscenes, the expression is great. And from what I know, the pre-rendered cutscenes were rendered on PC using the same engine but on PC. And the in-engine cutscenes, the in-engine animation, it's terrible in Rise of Lyric. You have certain characters that stand there like zombies, specifically Amy. She just stands there like a walking corpse. And it's genuinely horrible animation. However, the pre-rendered ones have great expressive animation that is not choppy. It doesn't have Sonic's eyelids clipping through his head like it would in-game. And, it looks like the budget for this game was fairly high as well. Somewhat higher than Lost World. And this was an external development studio. They were given this high budget. And then you look at everything after Boom. After Sega almost got bankrupted by the entire Boom project, even though they caused the problems, Mania, it doesn't need the highest of budgets, but I still think Mania did not have a high enough budget. You look at Encore mode, that doesn't scream high budget at all. That screams color palette swap, addition of 2 characters. A modder could have done that in a reasonable time without a budget. And, you look at Sonic Free Air, modders have. And then you look at Blind Squirrel with the most recent Sonic game, Sonic Colors Ultimate. That does scream very, very low budget. And development issues and flaws, similar to what happened with Big Red Button.
I mean, it doesn't fix all of them, but from the state it was till then, you could really just draw parallels from then to Sonic Colors Ultimate.
Yes, you definitely could. And also another thing that leans into Sonic Mania not having the highest budget is, upon launch, the game it definitely had a few issues and a few blatantly obvious decisions that could have been made weren't even made, such as supersonic on the Y button. Now, why wouldn't something as simple as that been added had it not been for budget? Like, I get it, Mania doesn't need the biggest budget, but like, it should have had a higher budget. Most of these Sonic games should have. Forces definitely should have. Like, the budget for Unleashed, I'm pretty sure is the highest budget Sonic's ever had. Well, the thing is, you make an investment, you put in as much money as you can, and then you earn this money back, and also whatever's left from the project, you obviously take back. Why don't they do this as much? Because you look at games like Persona and Yakuza, these have very, very high budgets. I'm pretty sure the most recent Yakuza game has been given a higher budget purely to take Hedgehog Engine 2 and adapt it into the Dragon Engine, and to adapt that engine to suit Yakuza. And Forces wasn't even given that budget to make the engine fully fleshed out, to make it the way it should look, and to make animations the way they should look.
No, because they feel like as long as they throw out a Sonic game, people will buy it.
Which is honestly true for the most part. People will buy anything Sonic related as due to his growth as a character in terms of the media. People will, that's completely evident with Forces that people will buy anything Sonic related because it was considered a success financially, I mean, but of course nobody liked the game, but it still sold really, really well for a Sonic game. So I don't think Sonic in that sense could fail because just like Pokemon, the quality of the games may differ very hard. Like, the quality between, let's say, new Pokemon Snap and Sword and Shield. There's such a huge
But
difference
people
between the
still buy
qualities of
both
those.
of them.
Yeah, and people would still buy the worst game, all because it's a brand new entry in the Pokemon series. Sonic is that big. I could make a comparison for any other game like that, like Mario or Zelda, but those people will buy anything Mario or Zelda related, but that's less because of it being the characters, and it definitely helps that the games themselves are of higher quality.
I mean, you look at Call of Duty, because that's the game I can draw that comparison to. In 2019, they finally did it. They finally innovated. However, some people did not like certain steps taken at innovation. But then in 2020, they just went back to the old way of the gameplay. They didn't even use the new engine. They used the old engine that they were trying to innovate away from. And this game, in my opinion, was terrible. And then this year they're trying to innovate again, but now it's about as generic and bland as it can be, or it looks that way. And that's the problem. Millions of people will still buy it up. Back in 2019, that game that innovated, because Call of Duty is a yearly title, that game specifically that innovated is now the highest selling Call of Duty game ever. It shows that people will just, even if people don't like it, they still buy it. And unfortunately, when you look at games like Mania versus Forces, Forces has sold more, thus it is more financially successful, and in Sega's eyes, it was the better game. However, realistically, Mania's the better game. People like Mania a lot more and enjoy Mania more. Yet, because it hasn't got as many sales, that doesn't matter. And you can show that Mania both had a low budget and low expectations from Sega by the fact that Forces was the $40 game, Mania was the $20 game. I mean, that sort of makes sense because it is a 2D side scroller, but at the same time, Forces shouldn't have been $40. You should lower that price.
I think 20 and 20 would have been better.
Yeah, I think that too.
Yeah, but I think it also degrades. The price of a game could also tell you a lot about its quality, and I definitely don't think that Sega saw it as a failure in a lot of people's eyes when they first released it, because a lot of people hadn't seen the game or the gameplay yet, so they really hadn't, unless they didn't have like game beta testers, then they must have seen it as a truly decent game to pump out. So, I mean, that just raises the question of, I guess, taking risks in a sense of like why, just
I mean,
the
wasn't Forces delayed? And if it was
No.
delayed,
I don't think it was. I think that was Team Sonic Racing, and even then,
no,
Team Sonic
TSR
Racing was
was.
still garbage.
yeah, that's the unfortunate part. Like TSR, you can tell TSR did not have a high budget at all. Static cutscenes with single animations that are reused a lot.
Yeah.
Like literally, my YouTube videos, I could recreate the same level of cutscene because they are that easy to do. They look that easy to do. I mean,
Yeah,
obviously,
no.
obviously, YouTube videos are pre-rendered. You put everything in versus coding it in, but that's not the point. Um, and then you've got the gameplay, which, not being funny, it reeks of low budget. It is all
It-
one single track, one type of gameplay, and then you've got the best Sonic racer, in my opinion, All Stars Racing Transformed. Three gameplay styles, tracks with so many different routes. The gameplay was great. It did lack cutscenes, but it didn't need cutscenes. The gameplay was that good. It didn't
Right.
need cutscenes.
Right, for sure.
And also there was
Uh,
a lot more characters, a lot more. And obviously they had their three different types of gameplay skins. You wouldn't have this many characters in All Stars Racing Transformed with three variations of said characters that also have different looks depending what kit you get for them, whether it's balance or, acceleration, versus Team Sonic Racing where it's 12 characters all with a single gameplay
yeah.
style
I do.
versus
Who
the
doesn't?
24 times 3 in a way of All Stars Racing Transformed. Transformed clearly had a big budget because that was back when Sonic games were given big budgets. And then you look at TSR that had, I wouldn't be surprised if the budget was half that of Forces still.
Right.
Um, I mean, as much as I like uh, All Stars Racing Transformed, there's another game that I know of that's I'm sure had a better budget than TSR. Do y'all remember Sonic Riders?
Yeah.
I
Who
do.
doesn't?
Ah, that was a game. And
Yeah, from what I've seen, that had a that looks like a high budget game. That looks like a passionate game, and it brought a new idea to the table. It executed it well, and for the most part, it did that a second time with Sonic Riders
Zero gravity.
Zero Gravity.
I think it's Zero Riders is a very good game. I remember being on call with Expool when I first bought it, and I beat it in that same sitting because it was so short. The campaign was, but it was still very fun.
I wouldn't recommend playing the Wii version on console. You could play it on Dolphin, but yeah.
Yeah, I've
Right.
seen that Riders Zero Gravity is definitely much better on Dolphin, but I mean, we'll just pretend Free Riders didn't exist because that was, from what I've learned with Free Riders, is that it was a deal taken up with Xbox that had more or less very, very low budget put towards it. And it also just looks like they tried to incorporate a gimmick of a low quality camera for a fairly weak console when doing stuff with that camera, and it all started to crumble. And what's weird with Sonic Free Riders is like just the gimmick behind it. Like why have you got to touch another person like lean up against them and balance boards and stuff versus literally just pretending to be on the board yourself in front of the camera and having the camera mimic that in game.
I mean, the demo was fun, but once I played it a little more, I realized I'm like, oh no. Not only that the game was severely lackluster because of those shortcomings, but as you said before, remember the TSR had those cutscenes?
Yeah. Yeah, exactly. And that was the and it's funny because I'm pretty sure 2 years later or 1 year later you have Sonic and Sega All-Stars Racing. That is basically just as lacking as TSR, and its gameplay was kind of bad. But then you see that the development studio are given a much higher budget, and they innovate so well with the sequel to that
Right.
stellar game.
Probably by far my favorite racer ever.
To be fair, like maybe same. I mean, I mean, I don't think it'd be fair to compare it to GTA 5. Not mainly because GTA 5 isn't a racer per se, not anymore, but obviously that has the car mechanics. Yeah, yeah,
It's
yeah.
more
All
like
Stars
Mario
Racing
Kart,
is much more
really.
like a Mario Kart that game. Like obviously I played it recently as I was gifted it, and then in my opinion, I was quite good at the game because I played it as a kid on PS3 and on iPads and stuff. And I really enjoyed the game, and I do enjoy getting better at that game because that game rewards you for good gameplay. I don't see TSR rewarding you for good gameplay. Plus, the other two people on your team are just random number generators to whether you will fail the race or not. Like, there are points of TSR that I can't get past purely because Knuckles and Tails aren't second and third in the race. But yeah, that was definitely leaning off topic. However, we are reaching the 1 hour mark. So do you think we should all wrap it up here for first episode?
I feel like we should, just because I don't want to make it feel too bloated or convoluted in that kind of sense. So,
Yeah. Well, Dylan, do you wanna do the outro?
what kind of we never planned for an outro, so I don't even really know.
That is true.
If you enjoyed the video, like and subscribe. Please do that. We're lonely.
And also subscribe to all of our channels. Mine's Sticks Unleashed on YouTube, and then there's also Dido. Uh 90s, what's your channel?
My channel is Certified Tea Sipper.
Link in DC. Yeah, about does it.